Imagine opening your investment account one morning and seeing a number that doesn't look right. Not because it's higher than expected, but because it's suddenly lower. Much lower. The market has been falling for weeks. News headlines are tense. Conversations about the economy feel uncertain. Everywhere you look, someone is warning that things might get worse before they get better. So naturally, you start thinking, maybe I should move my money somewhere safer. Maybe I should just wait until things calm down. Maybe it's better to stop investing for a while. And in that moment, the decision feels responsible. Careful, even. Like you're protecting yourself from something dangerous. But here's the strange part. The exact moment that feels like the safest time to step away is often the moment when some of the most important long-term financial opportunities quietly appear. And the reason has less to do with markets, and more to do with something happening inside our own minds. Most people think investing is difficult because the economy is unpredictable. Markets go up. Markets go down. Nobody can perfectly forecast what will happen next. But that's not actually the biggest challenge. The real challenge is emotional. Because money is never just numbers on a screen. It represents security, stability, the ability to take care of ourselves and the people we care about. So when those numbers start falling, something very human happens. We react. Psychologists have studied this reaction for decades, and they've given it a name: loss aversion. It simply means that losing money hurts more than gaining the same amount feels good. In fact, for many people, the emotional pain of losing $1,000 feels roughly twice as strong as the happiness of gaining $1,000. And once you understand that, something about market behavior starts to make more sense. Because when markets fall, millions of people aren't just watching numbers change. They're feeling something much deeper. Fear, uncertainty, a quiet instinct to protect what's left. Imagine someone named Daniel. Daniel started investing a few years ago. Nothing extreme, just small monthly contributions into a simple portfolio. He understood the idea of long-term investing. He had heard about compounding and patience and staying the course. For a while, things felt encouraging. Markets were rising. His account balance slowly grew. Every month, the numbers looked slightly better than the month before. Then one year, things changed. The market dropped 10%, then 15%, then 20%. And suddenly, all the calm logic Daniel once felt about investing started to disappear. Not because he forgot the principles, but because the experience felt different when real money was involved. Every drop in the market felt personal. Every headline about recession made him question whether staying invested was still the right decision. And slowly, a quiet thought appeared. What if I lose even more? That thought is incredibly powerful, because once it takes hold, the brain shifts into protection mode. You start imagining worst-case scenarios. You imagine the market continuing to fall. You imagine years of savings disappearing. And suddenly, selling feels like relief, not profit. Relief. But here's the subtle twist. When millions of investors feel that same relief at the same time, something interesting happens inside the market itself. Prices fall even further. Not necessarily because the underlying businesses are suddenly worthless, but because fear is spreading faster than information. And that's where the emotional trap begins. Because during moments of widespread fear, assets often become cheaper than their long-term value would suggest. Stocks fall. Real estate slows down. Opportunities quietly appear. But most people are too busy trying to escape the discomfort to notice. Recessions are often described as economic slowdowns. Businesses reduce spending. Hiring slows. Growth becomes uncertain. But there's another side to recessions that doesn't get as much attention. Prices drop. Not just prices at grocery stores or retail shops. Prices for ownership, shares of companies, investment assets, sometimes even entire businesses. And when prices drop, something interesting happens for people who are thinking long-term. Future returns quietly increase. Imagine a simple example. If someone buys a stock for $100 and that company eventually grows over time, the return depends partly on the price they paid to begin with. If that same stock falls to $70 during a market downturn, the future potential return from that point becomes larger. Not because the economy suddenly improved, but because the entry price became lower. This is why experienced investors often say something that sounds strange at first. They don't celebrate recessions, but they also don't panic during them, because they understand that falling prices are not always a sign of permanent loss. Sometimes they're simply part of the cycle, and cycles eventually turn. This is where human psychology and financial logic begin to clash. Financially speaking, lower prices often create opportunity. Emotionally speaking, lower prices create fear. And fear is much louder than logic. Imagine walking into a store where everything suddenly costs 30% less. Most people would see that as a sale. But when the stock market falls 30%, people don't see a sale. They see danger. Why? Because the context feels different. When prices fall in markets, it's rarely quiet. It's accompanied by headlines, predictions, and endless speculation about what could go wrong next. And when uncertainty fills the environment, our brains naturally assume risk is increasing. But historically, markets have always moved through cycles of fear and recovery. Every major downturn eventually ended. Every recession eventually passed. Not instantly, not comfortably, but consistently over time. And this long-term pattern creates one of the most interesting paradoxes in investing. The moments that feel the most uncomfortable emotionally often become the moments with the greatest long-term potential. At some point, many investors experience a realization. The real challenge in investing is not predicting the economy. It's managing our own reactions. Markets will always fluctuate. News cycles will always amplify fear. Economic uncertainty will always exist in some form. But our response to those moments determines whether we move with the cycle or against it. When people sell investments during downturns, they often lock in losses that might have recovered with time. When people stop investing completely during recessions, they sometimes miss the very period when prices were most attractive. And this realization changes something. Instead of asking, "How do I avoid market drops?" the question becomes something different. How do I stay calm enough to think clearly when they happen? Because emotional stability becomes one of the most valuable financial skills. Not predicting, not timing perfectly, just staying steady when uncertainty appears. In real life, this doesn't mean ignoring risk or pretending recessions don't matter. Economic downturns can affect jobs, businesses, and households in very real ways. But it does mean understanding that investing decisions made during emotional stress are often the ones people regret later. That's why many long-term investors build simple systems that remove emotion from the process. Some invest a fixed amount every month, regardless of market conditions. Others focus on maintaining emergency savings, so they're not forced to sell investments during difficult times. Some simply limit how often they check their investment accounts when markets are volatile. These aren't complicated strategies. They're psychological strategies, small ways of protecting decisions from temporary emotions. Because the biggest risk during market downturns is often not the market itself. It's reacting too quickly to fear. Recessions will always feel uncomfortable. That's part of their nature. They slow economies. They create uncertainty. They remind us that financial systems move in cycles, not straight lines. But they also reveal something important about human behavior. Fear tends to appear at the same moment opportunity quietly arrives, and the difference between those two experiences often comes down to one thing: perspective. Understanding that markets fall, but they also recover. Understanding that discomfort does not always mean danger. And understanding that financial progress is rarely built during the moments when everything feels easy. More often, it's built quietly during the moments when patience feels hardest. If there's one reassuring truth in all of this, it's that you don't need perfect timing to benefit from long-term investing. You simply need enough awareness to recognize the emotional trap when it appears. Because once you see it, you can pause. And sometimes, that small pause is enough to turn fear into patience. And patience, over time, has a way of rewarding people who choose calm over panic. Not instantly, not dramatically, but steadily. And in the long run, steady progress is often the most powerful kind.